Hello, hello. I got some Karen Reed updates and I got some Diddy updates for y'all today. With that being said, we're gonna go on over here to Law and Crime and see and let them show what they got for us today.
And welcome back to
Come
Law and
on,
Crime.
Law and Crime.
I'm Jesse Weber. Thank you so much for joining us on our live coverage of Paul criminal trial here in New York in federal court. We're going to talk about what's happening in court today. We're also going to bring on our all-star panel that we're going to have for the next hour, hour and a half as we take your questions. By the way, everybody watching from YouTube right now, we got people from not only we got people from Canada, South America, Oregon,
I'm
South
only gonna
Carolina,
spend 45 minutes
Florida, UK,
on the Diddy
Pennsylvania. Let us know
portion.
where you're calling in from. Not where you're calling in from. The show. Let us know where you're messaging in from, where you're watching us. And we're going to take your questions, everything about this case. So anything that happened in testimony in the past few weeks, anything that happened today, we're going to talk about it. Let me just tell you what is happening. By the way, we're waiting to get Elizabeth Milner on our long front reporter as well to tell us what's happening in court. But first of all, the day started off about talking about Brendan Paul. Anyone who's been following Sean Combs saga knows that name. He's been arrested during the course of this investigation at an airport. He's a former assistant, associate of Sean Combs, potentially when it comes to drugs. He was granted immunity by the court today, so he invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, and then he was granted an order of immunity protection in order to testify. So now he's compelled to testify. And then we've continued on with the testimony of summary witness Elisa Henley, a special agent with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Oh, I hope you guys can hear it.
Continuing her testimony, that's
Good
right,
evening, good
yesterday.
evening.
He is a summary witness. So basically what he's doing is providing an overview or summary of a plethora of digital evidence for the jury. And really where they're highlighting are the travel and payment receipts for hotels, planes, setting up these sexual events that are at the center of the sex trafficking racketeering case, freak-offs, wild king nights, that Combs was using his staff and company to carry all this out. Remember, transportation to engage in prostitution. Two of those charges were the street that he transported sex workers and alleged victims for the
I gotta
purposes
give
of
me a
transporting sex
microphone
workers.
too.
He can be found guilty of that. It's a more straightforward charge. Sex trafficking, there is a travel component to that as well when you talk about inducing women into commercial sex acts of value or using force, fraud, or coercion. And also with racketeering, the more the prosecution can show that Sean Combs was using his staff, that there was a common agreement, that everybody knew what the end goal was to benefit Sean Combs, to benefit his businesses, that the idea was to create a pattern of racketeering or criminal conduct. They all were going to commit crimes, cover it up. The more you can show the participation or alleged participation of others, that's how you get to racketeering. Now, there were some text messages that also stand out that were read aloud to the jury as well. For instance, in the aftermath of the March 2016 attack on Cassie Ventura at the Elliott Continental Hotel, there was this message where Ventura had texted Combs, this was supposed to be a really exciting day for me, and I wish I could just crawl in bed and stay there until I look better. Then there's this back and forth with Sean Combs' assistants. So you have his assistant, Ellie Maroon, hasn't testified in this case yet. Ellie Maroon, there were multiple calls, and there were phone calls between Ventura and Combs. And then at one point in time, Christina Forbes, Combs' staff also hasn't testified in this case, texted Maroon, I'm going to ask just to cover damages. And Maroon responds, he wants to speak to Spanish security guard, and maybe supposed to be the person who lied. The security guard in order to make sure that footage or something like that is testified about that earlier in the trial. And then Corum texts back, say they had a fun drunk night to try and get more info. So you can see the allegation is using his staff, his resources in order to cover up alleged crimes. Now, under cross-examination by Tony Garagos, which is what's happening right now, the allegation is that all these summary charts with all of these messages, they purposely don't include messages that are beneficial to the defense. For example, there's a message that this investigator was asked, I'm always ready to freak off. This is from Cassie. Or I can't concentrate. I'm so turned on. I'm going to 23. Pack us a bag. There's message from Sean Combs to Cassie, I love you so much. How did this happen? And Tara responds, I wonder that too. There's another message from Combs, I'm not asking you to have love, freak off. So again, this is evidence that would seem to show perhaps these were willing participants. Also, why did you not include this in your summary charts? Why?
Exactly.
And right now, I believe the jury is listening to some video. We don't know
I
what this is.
hope y'all
I
can
think
hear
they're wearing
this.
earphones. Everybody in the gallery doesn't know what it is, so we're not really sure. We've been listening for quite some time. So right now, we're going to take your questions. Let me bring in my all-star panel. We got with us Nina Sewan-Lona, Sirius XM host, who's been following this case religiously, and also Alexis Rosenberg, trial attorney and federal litigator. It's great to have you both here. Questions. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Okay, so we got a question from Natalie Susanna. And I will throw this to you, Nina. Will the mule Brendan Bull testify? Sure seems like it, right?
It does seem like it. And it's funny, I went to Syracuse University, and when I first heard of Brendan, I'm like, where do I know that name from? He played basketball at the school. And now he's involved in this, this big trial. I think, he has the immunity deal, and he's a big part of the drug part of this case. So I think Brendan will take the stand, and we'll see what he has to say.
I think he's important for two things, right? So the prosecution has been saying that Sean Combs has used drugs to keep victims compliant, but also drug offenses are underlying crimes of the racketeering charge. Prosecutors need to prove at least two underlying crimes, whether it's possession with intent to distribute drug offenses, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery. So, obviously, we would be one case in that regard. Alexis, let me go to you. We got a question from Denise Lopez. If a mistrial is called for whatever reason, and he gets a retrial, can he cop a plea?
He could cop a plea. Yes, he could change his plea. They could offer him something. Obviously, we know there was a plea that was on the table. I don't know if it's still on the table. He turned it down. A lot of times, that when they make a plea, unless the case really goes, in favor, takes a real direct turn in favor of the prosecution, that plea that they offer will stay on the table. So that could still exist, but I think, believes to possibly witness.
Okay, so we got a question here from Olivia E. I'll throw this to you, Nina. Question, why was it necessary for the jurors to watch footage of the freak-offs? Is that what they were shown? They were shown. They were shown explicitly. And I'll tell you why.
So they were clearly explicit videos. I mean, I read countless reports where one juror was so upset that she actually took her headphones off, and she was just mortified at what she was watching. It's one thing to hear something, and it's another thing to see it. And when you see something, it really drives home the point of what was happening in that room. And it could also help the jurors understand maybe this wasn't consensual. If you're watching a woman having sex against her will, you will see that in the video. So I think it just really hits home, and it helps them, the prosecution, with what they're trying to prove. And it's graphic. Anything that you can get to help the jury feel an emotion is definitely going to help you.
I got a question from Fabiola. Oh, let me tell you what I think. Really, at the end of the day, right? These sexual events, because it is directed, that goes to the very fact that these events happen. You need to prove that. You need to prove that these freak-offs happen, or wild king nights, or hotel nights. You need to prove it happened. And by the way, the idea that he was recording these events and potentially using them as a way to threaten these alleged victims to get to do what they want, irritates I think particularly in this case. We got a question from Alexis from Fabiola, Delgado, LeBron. Can we go over the number of different ways we've proven Rico so far? Thank you for blessing us with your voluptuous hair. Well, take the village. Well, what can you do? It's a tough life. Alexis, what are we talking about?
All right.
Yes, go over the number of different ways we've proven Rico so far.
I sure can, Jesse. So I'm a firm believer that we have proven Rico, first of all. I think that we have, like we've repeated over and over again, the criminal acts. First, we only need two, as you stated earlier. But we have multiple line of was this enterprise, because we had all of these individuals that were setting up the rooms, that were coordinating moving the sex workers. We have these individuals that were making calls that could be viewed as coercion on behalf of Diddy. So I think the prosecution has checked off, as I keep saying, the RICO bingo card. Now, and once again, but the jury is going to determine that they ultimately convict him of that is another question.
Yeah, and by the way, taking a break for what the jury was watching as from a point of CNN, all these alleged freak-off tapes in 2012 and 2014 concerning Cassie Ventura. You know, we have this question from Olivia E. We're going to go back to her because I think it's a really important point. We've been hearing these summary witnesses for the past 2 days now. Do you think these summary testimonies are necessary, and why?
I just think because they're presenting additional text messages and additional evidence, and I think that they're actually planning something. They keep talking about KK, and a lot of these text messages are actually the interaction between Cassie and Jane Doe as to relate to them complaining or voicing their disappointment or their frustration or the fact that they're scared, voicing these things to KK. So the prosecution is going somewhere with this. They've already named KK as a co-conspirator. So I think it's really important for that next step is what I'm thinking they're setting up, which could be, and we've been talking about this, KK possibly taking the stand.
Well, I think they would have known by now, right? But right now, they haven't indicated that KK is going to take a stand. I think they said, like, call another summary witness, maybe. If they don't call her, the jury's going to be saying, that's weird.
I think they need to call her. You know, a lot of the times with RICO, you can see the hierarchy, right? And we're getting all this information that Sean Diddy Combs asked his employees to do X, Y, and Z. But who is the enforcer? I think in order to really hit home that RICO charge, you have to really prove that there's some kind of hierarchy. And I think KK provides that middle person between Diddy and between the many bodyguards and the many assistants and the people that are needed in order to execute these freak-offs and to really coordinate the transportation, right? So
Right.
I think it's a clue that I think would really help the jury see that structure and maybe be more likely to say guilty on the RICO charge.
Alexis, we got a question from Show and Tell Knitting. Seems like this case is a slam dunk for the government. What sorts of believable evidence can the defense present?
Yeah, I don't know about it being a slam dunk. I don't know about that. I don't know about this case being a slam dunk.
That would change any of the jurors' minds. I have thoughts, but I'll go to you first.
Okay, first of all, the federal
Sorry, I had to pause it. Yeah, yes, they proved a whole bunch of freaky sexual, you know, sexual activity. Yes, they did prove that Diddy, and is, you know, a chick beater. They did prove that, but where is the Rico? I'm looking at this case and I still cannot see what the Rico is.
government does not bring charges until they really work up a case. So usually if you're charged with a federal crime, there is a high percentage that you're going to be convicted right there. So I think that the defense, they need to focus on that domestic, which they seem to, this was just relationship, it was consenting, and although you might not agree with the lifestyle, these were consenting adults, there was no coercion, and I think that they are hammering in on that, and they need to make the jury believe that this is just a toxic relationship that when domestic, meaning domestic violence was involved, but it wasn't some organized crime, mob type scenario that this was occurring. Because the other charges are lesser heat, you won't necessarily get as much, and it's going to be difficult to really fight against the drug trafficking as well as prostitution.
Well, let me
Well, yeah, they can get him for the prostitution.
Even if you take the evidence from past vehicles,
But the thing is, though, even if they get them for the prostitution, it's not going to be that much time. Even if they get them for the prostitution.
For witnesses, when you're talking about the travel receipts and the communications regarding how sex workers will be transported and how the alleged victims will be
Now, if
transported.
they get them for trafficking, then it will be some time.
It's such a straightforward way to think. When you deal with racketeering, I feel there's a lot of leeway for the defense to go there. I think that closing argument time, they should take a list of elements and say why the prosecution can get that. Whether it's saying, show me this criminal activity, show me this conspiracy. Where are the other co-conspirators? What is the
Exactly. Where are the co-conspirators at?
underlying crimes? Yes, kid cutting, arson, right? You got Captain Clark kidnapping, Eddie Garcia, bribery, sex trafficking, Cassie, Jane, drug offenses. They felt they checked the boxes, for sure, but have they proven it?
Yeah, but will they stick?
And it does become a question, is there warm enough uphill battle to really sell the idea of Sean Combs as this mafia boss, this great, this crime engaging in a pattern of repeated criminal activity, using his businesses and his resources and his staff? Or was he just a celebrity who's engaged in, some illegal stuff, but he's not a racketeer? In terms of sex trafficking, I think there's a more clear-cut case with Cassie than there is with Jane. And you look at
I don't give a buck. If they can get Diddy with anything, it has to be something related to Cassie. Just saying.
last week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, the defense has done an exceptional job of cross-examining everybody from Mia, to Nolan, to, Cassie at the beginning, to Jane. This is a great case. It doesn't fit with the narrative of sex trafficker and victim. There are romantic aspects. There are aspects where people stay pleasure and full-blown messages. Does that sell for the prosecution? Does it confuse the jury? And that's something that I think the defense is going to more about. Okay, got a question here. This is interesting. This is from Penn. Actually, first, before we do that, we always get polls up. A lot of polls that we put up here. So the prosecution has called over 30 witnesses, which has presented the most compelling testimony. Ex-girlfriends, ex-girlfriends, we got 51%. Former employees, 36%. Hotel security staff, 11%. So that's interesting when you think about those numbers right now.
Well, for me, Cassie was the most compelling piece of evidence that you have, and that video says a lot. And I think for me, they presented
Be
a lot
back
of
in a minute.
information to try to round out this case. For me, from Cassie's testimony, I immediately saw the sex trafficking, the first charge, right? It's very clear to me that she was forced into sex with coercion, with bribery, and through bribery and things like that. But even just the transportation of prostitutes, that was very clear in my opinion from Cassie's testimony as well, because they laid out those 12 escorts. I'll never forget that. And they asked her about each one and where did you have intercourse with them? Ibiza, Miami, LA, and that for me was like, wow, they were traveling and coordinating this and having sex. So I agree, the ex-girlfriends, particularly Cassie, for me, have been the strongest pieces of evidence when it comes to this case.
Erica Charlotte says, Jesse, you are our Superman with Superman hair. Elizabeth Milner is Wonder Woman, and the panels are our Justice League of America. I don't think I can get that. I should just sign off right now. But what I will do is throw another question to Alexis. Erica, that's very sweet. Thank you so much. It's a question from Karen Day Smith. Not sure how to ask this. Can the jury ask questions about Christina Forum if she doesn't testify?
The jury can submit during deliberations, they can submit questions to the court that they want to ask. They can't necessarily submit questions directly to Christina, but they can submit questions about how they're supposed to handle things or apply, different things and ask that to
Diddy's fate. So talking about the summary witnesses reading these messages. What do you think?
What do you mean by sealed the fate? Diddy's fate?
Did sealed Diddy's fate. The idea, I guess, maybe if they're talking about the prostitution charge or sex trafficking, racketeering, because he sealed his communication. I guess the text messages over the last 2 days. How impactful is it going to be?
I mean, I think it's just the prosecution really trying to hit home any questions that the jury might have. It's kind of putting it all together. Like I said before, I think Cassie's testimony was so strong that we saw a lot of the things that they're trying to now clean up, right? The hotel receipts, the communication, the transportation of the prostitute. They're really trying to nail that nail into that coffin at whatever it takes. But to be honest, I think in order to put that nail in the coffin, you need the co-conspirator in order to get that RICO charge. Otherwise, in my opinion, you're just reiterating everything that we already saw with some of the other witnesses.
Well, a lot of people have questions about Mr. Reform KK. This is one from Joshua Furlong, so as we talk about alleged co-conspirators. Alexis, do you think KK will be called as a rebuttal witness as for the prosecution or as an ace card to counter the defense's witnesses?
It's possible. I think she needs to take the stand. I agree. I think that she's very important to the RICO charge because it does show the hierarchy. She would be allegedly part of that enterprise and a very important part of it. I do agree that the jury does want to hear from her. I mean, she's kind of like Epstein Maxwell. So I think that, that we want to hear her. And that is an option. That might be what ultimately happens.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break real quick. We're going to get Elizabeth Milner up, our in-court reporter. Let us know what the jury has been seeing and maybe get anything guessed about what they've seen in those videos. Before we do that, just want to let you know the second season of Long Box Hit Podcast, The Rise and Fall of Diddy. I host it. It is back June 17th. It's exclusively on Wondery Plus. And by the way, you guys are lucky because we actually have a little preview of our first episode. Check it out.
We have the bad. We ain't trying to hurt nobody.
For decades, he was untouchable.
I'm going from Harlem to Hollywood.
Sean Diddy Combs built an empire from the ground up. But now, it's all coming undone.
Sean Combs, the mogul as we know it, is over. I'm Jesse White, host of War on Crimes, The Rise and Fall of Diddy, federal trial. A front row seat to the biggest trial in entertainment history.
Sex trafficking, racketeering, prostitution, allegations by federal prosecutors that span decades, and witnesses who are finally speaking out.
This is at least the 10th lawsuit filed against Combs. Each week we break down courtroom dramas that happens.
How far will he fall, or will he walk free, but with a reputation in ruins? You can listen to The Rise and Fall of Diddy, the federal trial, exclusively on Wondery Plus.
See if I speed this up a little bit. Bear with me, y'all. Well, I might as well say this while I'm at it. Nah, never mind. I'm getting ready to talk about that in a little bit. Never mind. I keep that to myself. Who do y'all think related to Diddy who needs to speak up? Let me know in the comments. Who would you want to see be a witness in Diddy's case? Okay, let me speed this up a little bit more. There we go. Sometime today, Jesse. There we go.
back, everybody. So as promised, we have with us Elizabeth Milner, law runs import order enforcement in that courtroom every day for best money today. Elizabeth, great to see you. We have so many questions coming in for you. Let's get started because I know my time with you is limited. We'll start off with Danny. Question for Elizabeth. What issue was the judge upset about this morning regarding a possible leak? And, I don't know if we know the full context of it, but whatever information you provide would be great.
Absolutely. It was something that caught a lot of us by surprise this morning because the judge, when he came onto the bench, he seemed very kind of annoyed, very much kind of ticked off in a way just about what had happened. And so this is what we know so far is that the judge was upset about this article that came out yesterday. And the judge accused somebody either on the prosecution side or even the defense side of lying about this because it pretty much this article, and we're not 100% sure where this article came from, but what we believe it might be is having to do with just something that happened during the sealed proceedings that happened on Friday. And so the judge said that someone kind of spilled the beans about what kind of went on when everyone was kind of kicked out of the courtroom for about a 20-minute period. They locked the courtroom doors and everything to kind of have this sealed proceeding as opposed to doing it in the loading room. And so the defense says they recently became aware of this article and they were adamant that they were not the source of the leak, and the same with the prosecution. But really, it seemed like the judge was kind of taking issue up specifically with Maureen Comey and Mark Nichol because they're the leaders of both sides, right? Maureen Comey representing the prosecution and then Mark Nichol being kind of the leader of the defense team or lead counsel just on both sides. And so he said, on the extreme side of things that someone one violated the court's sealing order, but also if they're kind of on notice as far as just finding out who is responsible for this. And they said or they being the judge said the most extreme kind of action that he could possibly take is criminal contempt charges. So he's taking this very serious, and he seems very he did seem very kind of annoyed about just this whole week that had happened. Again, we don't know 100% sure what the article was verified that this article was the exact article, but we believe it might have been one that came out, just recently from a media outlet talking about what went down during the court proceedings that were sealed or supposed to be sealed on Friday.
We have a lot of questions about that. I think you pretty much answered it. We had a question from RSS. He asked Elizabeth to detail what happened when the judge recommended the defense of the sealed document. The question would never be, do we know what happened this morning with information being leaked? And the judge speaking about taking cell phone devices from the attorneys. I want to go to a question we have here, Elizabeth, from Olivia E. Did you get to see the jury's reaction to watching these explicit videos? And to be clear, what the jury's watching right now, are they freak-off tapes between Cassie and Sean Combs and others from 2012 to 2014? That's what CNN's reporting, but correct me if I'm wrong, if that's what you think they might be watching. And what's the reaction to watching these tapes?
Well, they have been watching sexual explicit tapes, freak-off tapes that had happened whenever Diddy was in a relationship with Cassie Ventura. And they were kind of bringing it up in correlation to the text message exhibits that we saw. We were kind of like, where is this kind of going? And I think we were going to kind of show possibly just another way that Cassie might have been in control during these particular tapes. And it was played kind of a lot today. And so what happens inside the courtroom
No.
much. But look, this is a tough case. Tough case to sit on and a tough case to hear all this evidence. Okay, got a question from Shady Goat. Is Diddy looking concerned in court, or is he his usual arrogant, smug self at the moment?
I wouldn't say arrogant and smug. I will say that from what I've seen of him, it seems like he is kind of wanting to know what the jury's reaction is to seeing these, what we believe to be the breakout tapes, sexually explicit tapes. I did see him kind of looking over to the jury box maybe to see what their reaction is to seeing these play, especially for the duration and the amount of time that they were played today. But from what I could see of him, it seemed like, especially as they were kind of wrapping up the direct testimony of Delissa Penland and then going into the cross-examination, it was kind of doing what he normally does, kind of taking everything in once they were starting to gear up for the cross-examination by Tony Garagos, and then see him do kind of the usual thing, passing off notes to his attorneys, that type of sort. But I wouldn't say he's necessarily sitting at the defense table and arrogant and smug, not at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about Diddy's demeanor. Alexander Mateo, what's Diddy's demeanor like today, knowing that such graphic videos are being viewed by the jury? Madhavi Dasi, sending one from India, asks, what was his reaction to the judge's question to the defense about information being leaked? So when all that was going on that you mentioned, how was Diddy reacting?
So, sorry everyone, there's about to be an ambulance passing, so just you can filibuster for me for like 10 seconds.
I'm gonna filibuster with great comments to you. We got a question, a great comment from El Spelunker who says, Elizabeth fan club in the chat. We got another one who says, this is from Sam. Elizabeth, you have such a calming nature and voice. You need to bring down your own podcast. You are a natural. So that's love for Elizabeth Moment. And not only did I have to filibuster, I was able to give you great compliments at the same time. So, yes, what was his demeanor like when the defense was talking about information being leaked, that whole issue? Yeah, what was Diddy doing?
I couldn't get a good gauge on just his reaction to everything. Like, I couldn't tell if he was confused, if he possibly knew about this. And so I couldn't really tell either way just what his reaction truly was. It seemed like everyone was a little on edge this morning when the judge was kind of, and I hate to use the word admonish because a lot of people have been using that word to describe, kind of talk to that the judge was giving both sides this morning. And so I don't want to say necessarily if he was leaning either way, that being Diddy in terms of what his reaction was. And so I would say, little to no reaction, only because I don't want to, guess and then move on.
Sure. That's fair. It's responsible reporting from Elizabeth Milner. I got a question from Olivia again.
Jesse, buy some glasses, man. Just sitting there squinting at the damn screen. Just buy some glasses.
Not about a juror being removed. The only other issue had to do something, and this is what we did learn in open court, that it had to do with juror number 7. So it's unclear if that was possibly in correlation with the article that came out, or if it's possibly another issue. But what we do know is that whatever the issue is, the judge said that he'll handle it at the end of the day. So far, no other juror has been dismissed beyond juror number 6. I think we already know about something that had happened just yesterday. Another juror being dismissed, so far that hasn't happened yet.
Interesting poll we have up here, and you're the best person to ask this question. The poll we put up is, do you think there's been a shift of energy in the jury box with the alternate juror? 51% say hard to say, 31% say yes, 16% say no. Unless the people commenting on this poll are actually in the courtroom, I don't know how you would know a shift in energy, but has there been a shift in energy? You're in the courtroom, you tell me.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen or felt kind of a shift in energy between, once the juror was dismissed. I will say it looked a lot different, especially yesterday, knowing that there is one less juror in the jury box. But I will say, this was something that the defense was kind of worried about. They were kind of concerned about what the energy was like, especially for the entire jury altogether moving forward. And so they asked the judge, they kind of asked the jury staff members what was told about this specific juror being dismissed. And so what the judge relayed to the defense and even the prosecution today was that the jury was told that a juror was just excused from the case. And so, it's interesting whether or not that they can kind of feel like, okay, man, we just lost one of our own, that type of thing. And so I haven't seen necessarily energy shift or change or anything like that. And from what I can see, the jury is still doing their job. They're still showing up on time. They're still jotting their notes down. They're still paying attention to
lethargic, something else?
I think people might just kind of be wondering what's happening next. You know, obviously with this type of testimony, that being the summary witness, the summary charge, the summary exhibit, it's not the most juiciest testimony, especially because it's
It's
about the
not.
text messages we've seen, videos that we've seen, you know, in terms of even just the sexually explicit videos that were shown today in court. You know, the jury has seen, I guess, screenshots or images of this. I think probably seeing, you know, longer durations of these particular videos might be having them feeling possibly a type of way. But as far as what I can tell in terms of just the energy across the board, surprisingly, as far as I can tell, because they're lawyers, right? Everyone kind of keeps a poker face. I haven't seen much of a shift. And maybe, you know, as the prosecution is slowly kind of thinking their case, maybe they're just ready, you know, to see kind of what the next few witnesses have to say in terms of testifying. But what we do know is with the defense case slowly on the horizon, their case in chief, or the defense's case, I should say, is only going to last about 2 to 5 days. So we're slowly seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I think once closing arguments start to happen, and then once the jury is kind of given those jury instructions, and then they kind of take the charges to deliberate, then I feel like we might kind of see the mask kind of lift up just a little bit in terms of just how both sides are feeling in terms of maybe worriedness, anxiousness, maybe just all the different feelings across the board.
By the way, you saw Brendan Paul today, didn't you? He was in the courtroom at the beginning. Talk to us about what that was like. And also, for anybody who doesn't know, why is he an important witness? What do you expect him to testify to?
Yeah, well, I personally think he's a pretty important witness. He was one, Diddy's assistant, but also, and I'm sure maybe this is something that is brought, you know, and talked about either by the prosecution or the defense, or it might not be talked about altogether, but what we do know about Brendan Paul is he was named in one of the lawsuits against Sean Combs, kind of naming
The
him as
drug
the
move.
we learned during the course of this trial that he was actually one of Diddy's assistants. And so I think because he kind of had to invoke his Fifth Amendment right not to kind of, you know, self-incriminate himself, I think it might possibly have to do with just drugs, maybe drugs that were taken, and maybe large amounts of drugs that were given to Diddy, and maybe that were bought and paid for possibly by Brendan Paul. So I'm kind of curious of what he has to say. But I will say this, Jesse, when I saw him today in court, it was kind of weird seeing, you know, we've seen his photo, right? But it was weird seeing like him in full person. He's very tall. He came into the scene this morning before the jury was brought in to kind of give his immunity order, which was signed off by the judge. But he is very tall. He comes in with a suit. He seems kind of like, you know, this is out of his element in terms of testifying. But what we do know is he was subpoenaed to testify. And so even in terms of just him like answering Mary Slavic or Christy Slavic's questions this morning about his immunity deal, he was kind of looking at the person who was actually asking the questions. And so it'll be interesting to see when he does eventually go up to testify. It's unclear though, given the amount or how long the prosecution has taken, what time that'll be, if it'll trickle into tomorrow. So we'll kind of wait and see what he all has to say when he eventually testifies.
Fabiola Delgado LeBron is worried about you. Elizabeth, did you have breakfast with that Celsius? Because I don't want you crashing later. So everybody's worried if you're getting enough sleep, if you're eating the right thing.
I know someone wrote in the comments yesterday that I looked exhausted, and I was just like, I texted my mom. I was like, do I look tired? Do I look exhausted? But I promise I'm getting at least 5 hours of sleep. You know, I'm eating in the morning. I'm eating before I go back to court.
That's a backwards comment, right? You look tired. You look drained. Thank you. Okay. We got a question from Defying the Norm. Is Diddy's family still attending every day?
Yes. Diddy's family is still attending every day. It's kind of a different lineup in terms of who all is showing up. So, for example, today we saw Justin Combs inside the courtroom. Janice Combs has been coming to court pretty much every single day. I will say we haven't seen his daughter since probably the first week of trial. And so it's been a while since we've seen them. I'm sure they'll come back probably during the closing argument or sometime possibly once the defense case starts. But we haven't seen his sister Keisha this week. We haven't seen Christian Combs. I don't think we've seen Christian Combs this week, and I don't think we've seen Quincy this week. But it's only Tuesday, so who knows? Maybe they'll show up tomorrow. Maybe they'll show up Friday, because we are off on Thursday. So we can all celebrate the holiday too.
Let me ask you this. When you're listening to this testimony and you're seeing these summary witnesses, are you seeing new messages you haven't seen before? Are you seeing things that were already mentioned by Cassie or Jane or other witnesses, Mia, or are there messages that are completely new? Are there travel records that are completely new? Are there receipts that are completely new?
I think for the most part, in terms of just what we're seeing new, it's maybe possibly the American Express credit card statement, which we're seeing, a lot of money that is spent either to book travel, to book these hotel rooms, and again, it's a lot of money. And of course, Diddy's credit card bill is not just, a $500, $1,000. It's like, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So maybe that's probably the newest information we're seeing. But in terms of just these text messages that we're seeing, maybe possibly the ones that were around March of 2016 when Christina Forum and Eli Maroon, one of the assistants, were texting about how to get Eddie Garcia's phone number and just some of that. I feel like that was kind of the newer stuff that we were seeing. But in terms of even the messages between Cassie and Diddy, Diddy to Cassie, Diddy to Christina Forum, and vice versa, I feel like, and they feel like that because, we've seen so many messages. But it does feel like these are things we've seen before, and I think they're just kind of making it seem new because they're attaching it to a timeline, kind of putting, a date with a corresponding exhibit number all attached to everything that maybe it's supposed to feel new, but it does feel like the same messages that we've seen weeks before or even just recently that are just being shown to the jury over and over again.
Elizabeth, got a question from Naturally Now. Any difference between how the men and the women jurors react to these videos? And by the way, thanks for amazing reporting. So there you go. Naturally Now.
Well, thank you so much. But as far as the difference between the male and the female jurors, I'm not seeing much. And here's the issue of that. Where I'm sitting inside the courtroom is kind of like a little obstructed view, mainly because of the giant exhibit screen. And I normally sit by the giant exhibit screen because I have bad eyesight. And so I really need to be able to see what we're seeing in terms of these exhibits. And so from what I've seen of just the female jurors, they kind of turn at an angle where I can't see their face. Really, I'm just kind of seeing their back. So unfortunately, I'm not able to get what their reaction is in terms of just seeing, especially these, freak-off tapes and those types of things. But for the most part, I think it's kind of across the board in terms of just how professional they all have been. I don't think anybody's been giggling or kind of, shielding their eyes or any of that sort, or taking off their headphones too early, but also taking off the headphones when I think they're kind of tired of hearing enough of what they're hearing and having to listen to.
All right, Elizabeth. Well, I'll tell you what. We're gonna send you back in a little bit. We have a lot more reporting to do for the day. By the way, Elizabeth's gonna be on with me later. We'll do a full daily recap on Sidebar, everything that happened during today's testimony. Because this is just the middle of the day. I mean, Elizabeth, real quick, do you think they're gonna go to 5 today? I mean, yesterday they ended kind of early. Do you know if they're gonna go till 5? Because I think they need a little bit more time with this summary witness.
Yeah, Timmy Arago says she still has a little bit less than an hour left of her cross-examination. Then given that there might be some redirects, I don't even know if Renee Cole will actually be on the stand today, but I might be kind of jumping the gun a little bit too early there. I don't want to make any type of promises, but the judge didn't give any type of signal as in terms of if we're going to end at 3 today or possibly at 5. Maybe there's like a little happening at least by like 4 o'clock today, but we'll see.
All right. Elizabeth Milner, great reporting as always. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, let me bring back in Alexis Rosenberg, and let me bring back in Mina Sewa-Lona. Mina, oh, by the way, do we have with us Nima Ramani too? If we do, let me bring him on as well. Oh, yeah, look at that. We got Nima. Hey, Nima. Okay, Mina, I'll start with you. Because, I know that our time is coming to an end shortly. What are you taking away from the case right now? How strong do you think the prosecution's case is? Do you feel that there is a clear-cut case of racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to the age of prostitution? It's kind of an unfair question because the defense also hasn't presented their case yet. They have done vigorous cross-examination. But, real quick.
I think it's very clear the first sex trafficking charge when it comes to Cassie. In my mind, that's pretty solidified. Also, the transportation of prostitutes, pretty solidified there. I wonder about the RICO. To me, it looks like it's forming, but as I said before, I think there's a piece there that is missing. And I believe that Lou is Christina Forum KK. And I think if she can get on the stand, I think that she can corroborate a lot of the things that the other witnesses said, and then maybe even add her own testimony. And she'll really be able to prove that there's an intermediate in this alleged criminal enterprise, and that will help with the structure, right? Without KK's testimony, you have Diddy, you know, kind of organizing this very loosely with bodyguards and employees, and you know, it seems not as organized. So I think that depending on how the prosecution ends this trial, it could have a more meaningful case for the RICO. I think Brendan Paul is a very important piece of this because he brings that drug trafficking and drug charge into the fold. Allegedly, part of what Diddy did was he introduced women to these drugs, and they got hooked on these drugs, and that was part, allegedly, of the control tactic that he used in order to get them to do the sexual thing that he wanted them to do. So Brendan Paul, very important. Also KK, very important. I think the sex trafficking in one charge is pretty solidified. I think the transportation of prostitutes, very solidified. I think we're almost there with the RICO. We need more.
Nima, going to you. We got a question. Got a few questions for you. This is from Straight Ball. Could the prosecution get this case heard without KK's testimony? Not really sure what it means to get it heard. I mean, the jury's going to be submitted the case, but I guess they need KK.
I don't think they need KK, Jesse, but I think it's being dismissed by the prosecution not leaning on her. She's a co-conspirator, as is Rob. You know, when I was a federal prosecutor, I would have charged both of them for they weren't going to cooperate. We know you don't have to actually participate in the sex act to be convicted of sex trafficking. Canada co-conspirator or either and a better. And we know that she was over to the staff, that she was his right-hand woman, and absolutely she's criminally liable. So the fact that the prosecution is going to arrest as early as tomorrow without putting Christina Forum as a cooperating witness for me is it fails. I think the fact that the prosecution charged conduct regarding victim 3, Gina, she's not testifying. That is also a fail. Now listen, very pro-prosecution, but what I like to do is overwhelm the defense. So there's absolutely no argument that this was consensual. So I think prosecution is in the bag, the Mann Act charges. I think sex trafficking is tough because of all of Cassie's emails and text messages. I do believe she was sex trafficked, but I can see jurors asking themselves, well, why did she stay in a 10-year relationship? Similar to the defense. Because to Harvey Weinstein, if you were abused, why did you go back to it? And I understand the psychology of it. But I think that's one of the challenges. And if you're looking at RICO,
But yeah, you were saying if you're looking at RICO, what are those?
if you're looking at RICO, I think you can get to RICO without sex trafficking. You can get through extortion, you can get through bribery, you can get through obstruction, witness tampering, arson. I mean, there's so many other RICO predicate acts. But, you know, I was really unlikely to tie this up and above sex trafficking. Proving that force, proving that coercion without, you know, Jane's love contract, without words of affirmation from Cassie. I think that's the challenge in the case. Something that the defense will display.
I said before, I said again, I think that this is going to be a long deliberation process.
It is
Wild, sort of,
very long deliberation process.
trying to put all these together for racketeering and sex trafficking. I think this is going to be quite some time. Maybe rival Karen Reed's deliberation process. I think we're still pretty far from that. Okay, Alexis, I go to you. Got a question from Enlin DK. Is there any other point to keep showing the freak-off videos from the defense other than trying to desensitize the jury to that?
I don't think the prosecution is trying to desensitize the jury to them.
Well,
We don't know.
the defense, because they're actually cross-examining the summary witness and having the summary witness look at these videos and have the jury look at these videos.
I mean, that is a possibility. I don't believe that's why they're doing it. I mean, we're not seeing the videos, so we can't really speak to exactly what's on the videos and as to why the defense would want them to look at the videos. It could be on the defense. I mean, on the video that he wasn't orchestrating it. It could be on the video that it appeared communication, that it was consensual. I mean, there are so many things that could be on the videos that would be a basis for why the defense would want those videos to be shown, and the individual videos.
I mean, Nina, you want to talk about a poll? Listen to this. Do you believe the jury can remain impartial after being exposed to sex sexually explicit videos. 54% say yes, but 45% say no. That's pretty close. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said before, when you watch it, right, you're looking for body language, verbal cues, all of those things can sway a jury. We're not seeing it, we're not privy to what's on there, but one particular testimony from the Punisher, he said that at times you could see on Cassie's face that she was frustrated or annoyed or unhappy. All of those things are things that you're going to be looking at, and they can really sway your ideas about this sex act. Is it consensual? Is it not consensual? And I'm not surprised at that role at all. I think
All about
reading
consent.
into what they're seeing in these videos can really sway a jury.
Oh, by the way, I found out maybe you can actually stay with us for a little bit longer, so I'm so happy about that. Nima, here's a good question we haven't been asked in, what, the 6 weeks we've been doing this show. I will tell you, I don't remember seeing this question. This is from NF. Jesse, will we ever find out P. Diddy's legal fees over what they'll overall end up being? What is he looking at legal fees? Will we ever find out, Nima?
No, we won't, but I can give you a very good guess. He's going to be spending 8 figures. That's $10 million plus. No, I've heard the number.
Damn.
You know,
10 million plus in legal fees.
attorneys for a complex federal case
Damn.
take at least $1 million, right? And he's got a small army of folks though. I think the daily burn in this case is at least $100,000 per day. Just doing some rough math and talking about the experts. Because you have appellate lawyers there that are just watching this file, right? And they're getting ready in case Holmes is convicted. You got to appeal this to the Second Circuit. So you have a lot of lawyers dealing around the clock on this case. Look, maybe if we had taken that $10 million and spent it on Cassie Ventura and settled that lawsuit before she filed it, maybe he wouldn't be in this position. So he's throwing everything at it. He's literally like.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that, Nima? Do you think the fact that she had filed the lawsuit, settled with them, with the government, does the jury look back and say she had no to testify against her? Wasn't she compelled to testify in the subpoena? Or, hey, listen, you spoke with this whole thing in motion. This is your fault. I don't know how much the settlement, the lawsuit and the settlement is going to affect your credibility. I don't jump on the train that makes her not a credible witness. Where do you stand?
No, it was more, my point was, had he settled with her.
No, I get it. I totally get it. I'm just curious generally how the jury is going to view that lawsuit.
Yeah, so now, even I'm a former prosecutor, I'm currently in a lawyer, so I think jurors can take that into account. Look, there's someone that's $30 million richer, right? Was she truly a victim? I believe she was a victim, so no one's a big comment, but jurors ask themselves, hey, you spent 10 years of your life, 10, 11 years of your life with Diddy. You put out 9 records, right? For $30 million richer.
Well, Nina says no. Nina says no. She didn't put out that.
I didn't say record. That was the point.
Oh,
that
she's
I
gonna
recorded
do.
9 thing,
But she
and
recorded
there was nothing, and he told me I needed to have sex.
That's the point.
Yeah, she recorded that. It's stand corrected. Right. She recorded 9 records. She didn't put out 9 records. Look, she's $30 million richer. So they may be asking themselves, was she truly a victim? Or did she sign up for this lavish lifestyle? And I think she was a victim. I think that's when that absolute juror will consider. Even though she doesn't have a motive to lie, like some of the victims who have a pending civil lawsuit, hers have settled. But I think that's something that is going to take into that jury deliberation.
Nina, from your perspective, look, I think the jury has to do an assessment of Cassie and her career, right? In the sense, was she going to be this larger-than-life star, or did Sean Combs keep her down and have financial control over her? And in a way, because of that, she couldn't maybe independently make the kind of money she wanted to. And look, James says the same thing. She wants to do OnlyFans, calls her letter. When you look at Cassie, the jury is going to be trying to figure out, well, what kind of career could she have had, would she have had if she wasn't dating Sean Combs? Because financial control is an element, a characteristic of sex trafficking, right? It's a form of coercion. It's a form that you might be able to hold over somebody in order to get them to do what you want.
They are going to look at that, and that's the thing. We'll never know where where Cassie's career is going to go because she was wrapped up in this lifestyle that Diddy, according to her testimony, wanted and controlled. Prior to her meeting Diddy, she had a very successful career. She was working with Brian Leslie. That's how she even got into a room to be with someone like Diddy and Bad Boy because at the time, everything Diddy was putting out was touching the charts. So you don't get signed to Bad Boy during that time without having some significant success already. So her career was she was on her way up. She had songs that had hit the radio and then she meets him and all of a sudden none of the music is coming out. I mean, this idea that $30 million makes it all worth it is sickening to me, right? She said on the stand, I would give that money back had I not had to go through this experience. Her having all that money doesn't take away the trauma that she says that she witnessed and all the terrible things that she's had to go to therapy over for years to the point where she wanted to commit suicide, right? So I think the jury's going to evaluate all of that. Just because she received the payout doesn't discredit her as a witness. It actually, I think, helps the prosecution in that she has no skin in the game here. There's no reason for her to testify. She already got her money. There's no reason for her to testify other than the fact that the federal government looked into these claims that were not only put out by Cassie, but also lawsuits as well, and found their own case and decided to pursue this with their own witnesses and their own trial.
Alexis, we got a question for you from the Don. Question to Alexis: does she think that they might have settled with Christina Coram, or is there something else we're not seeing?
Does she, is the question, do they think the state settled with her?
I'm not sure.
The government? I don't know. I don't think that the government has, well, first of all, in a criminal case, there's not really a settlement. But there may have been some immunity deal or something, or the government
Yeah, that was
is going
probably a
to
deal
go
made.
after
Yeah.
her later. They can file charges against her later as well. So, but I don't think there is anything of that nature. Now, maybe there would have been some private settlements that we don't know.
I'm
Like
about to switch over to some Karine stuff in the next couple minutes.
filing lawsuit, somebody had, come to her and they had settled on the civil end. Yeah, that's a possible.
Well, just a follow-up question for you, Alexis. It's from Candela. Don't most cases already come tied up to some monetary compensation for damages? The whole argument for seeking money could be applied to all cases then.
Are we talking with regard to the initial settlement? I mean, I personally do not think that the jury is going to view the settlement that was made as something negative to her credibility, to Ventura's credibility at all. I agree that was done. It started this whole thing. It opened up Pandora's box. And
It did.
I think that her coming forward and restating in a little more detail.
Cassie's lawsuits was the start of everything.
Do not go against her credibility. They support it. I also do not think 30,000. I know it sounds a lot, first blush, but it's not a lot considering everything that this woman went through, and as well as
30 million?
that she was to her community.
30 million?
Right.
Okay, good. Okay, I might have misspoke. Sorry. Let me ask you this. This is from Philly Chica. Does the amount of drugs won't make a difference to prove drug trafficking in a RICO?
No, it does not. Now, it can affect the potential sentence under the federal sentencing guideline. The type and the amount of drugs matter a lot. So certain drugs, like cocaine and amphetamines, much smaller amount will give you significant federal prison time. Less serious drugs like marijuana, which is still legal under federal law, Schedule 1, might have to have significantly more. We're talking about ounces and ounces at the time to get that same amount. So yes, there is a schedule, and there is actually a table that will identify the potential sentence when you're charged with a drug trafficking offense. Now, in this case, he's not charged with drug trafficking. It's just a RICO predicate act. So it's something that the court can't consider the type of the amount of drug, but it's not going to do that linear progression like it would do for after the charge.
And the drugs also play a part in the
drug money. That is one of the allegations. Okay, by the way, got a nice comment for you. Nima, this is from abroad by Sarah Senna. Nima, you've been missed. So people are happy that you're here. Okay. This is an interesting one, and it was a big bombshell, I think, Nina. When it came out that Jane, right, was still getting her rent paid by Sean Combs, still had a lawyer being paid by Sean Combs, because Uriel 1000 said,
Okay, I want to go into some Karen Reed stuff. Here we go.
keep up with the speed, reliability, and security of Spectrum Internet. A discussion in the courtroom between the defense, prosecution, and Judge Beverly Cannelli about how to answer what would be a fourth question from the jury. It is unclear of the exact wording of the question, but we know Judge Cannelli is hesitant to answer it because she says the question is theoretical and the defense believes she should answer the question.
It's sort of all or nothing. It's if we find her guilty of this and she therefore automatically guilty of another. She's saying it's not only theoretical, but it is not something that she can answer because juries are not to consider the consequences of their decisions. In other words, if they're weighing the fact that they don't want to say guilty because it means she's guilty of a bigger charge. So she's leaving it alone. I think we're getting into some legal messiness where we're going to need some Michael Coyne talk in here because she's calling it a theoretical question and she wants to send a note back to the jury that says it is not a question I can answer. And the defense originally said to ignore the question and they were fine with it. Now Alan Jackson has stood up and said, no, I'm not fine with it. We're going to be exactly where we were after the first trial. They're having confusion about what it means if we find guilty for one part, whether or not that's an overall guilty. So the prosecutor Brennan was fine with the response by Judge Cannoni saying, this is not a question I can answer.
Right.
Alan Jackson, I don't know about the whole defense team, but Alan Jackson was not okay with that.
Right, and the expectation is that she will send a note to the jury with that answer, as opposed to bringing them in to answer the question in person as she did with the first three questions that we got earlier today. Our chief legal analyst, Michael Coyne, is with us now. Michael, I'm not sure how much of this you have already heard. Michael, coming on shortly.
This is about Karen Reed, what we're listening to now. And shout out to NBC 10 Boston for this.
That's exactly the point. So we can't read into what it means. All we know is that whatever their question is about this all or nothing idea of if we find her guilty on this, does it automatically mean this? That from the judge's point of view, from prosecutor.
And here's the problem I have with the judge. When the judge gave the jury instructions, she gave like 20 minutes long of jury instructions. Can't nobody remember all of that.
Brennan agrees that that is not something, because that would be the judge then interjecting herself into the deliberation room. And Alan Jackson seems to be arguing that actually you're trying to explain to them what each one means. She thinks, I need Coyne. This is what it sounds like, that what that means is you're considering consequences. We're considering, like, if I see she's guilty of OUI, is she then guilty of a motor vehicle homicide or such? In other words, then we're not going to find her guilty of OUI because we don't want her to be a bigger charge. What are the consequences of saying she's guilty of OUI?
Right. That's how that chief legal analyst joined us shortly now. Let's sort through this. You're looking at a live picture outside the courthouse now, where we've seen a large crowd gathering in support, mostly of Karen Reed. Many of them wearing pink, and that's the signal that they are in support of her. Staying relatively quiet. They've been warned not to make noise that would interrupt the deliberations that are happening inside.
They go the first time.
The Superior Courthouse, and last time it was pretty obvious.
All right, Michael Coyne, come on in, because they had a fourth question. We went through the first three questions and what Judge Cannoni had to say. This time around, they debated about
whether or not this question is theoretical or not. What does that mean when she says it's theoretical and not something I can answer at this time?
Well, they're not reporting that they actually have a decision on 2 counts. The question says if we have a not guilty on 2 counts but can't resolve the third, is that a hung jury? So in essence, it's a hypothetical as it presently exists. And so what she'd be looking for is a question that in essence says, we have resolved 2 counts with either a guilty or a not guilty, and in this case it would be guilty, but we're undecided on the third charge in coming to a unanimous decision. Does that mean we can't resolve it and therefore we are hung? And so what the judge is trying to do is try to give the jury time to resolve that third count that they're struggling with. You know, again, reading the tea leaves, it sure sounds like we're right back where the first jury was. They've decided and resolved counts 1 and 3 in all likelihood, but they are hung up on that complicated count 2, which deals with the DUI manslaughter charges.
Pull the thread here, Michael, because if this jury sounds as if they're in the same place as the last jury, and the exception being that this jury is asking the question, and it's one the judge cannot answer or will not answer, what risk is there that this jury is going to wind up in the same place as the other one?
It's way too early, I think, Glenn. They really have only been out, at most, if you want to count it, 2 days at this point. She has not given the Tui Rodriguez charge, which she will give if, in fact, they report back that they are actually hung with respect to one of the counts. She'll encourage them very, very strongly to reach a verdict and reach consensus on that, whatever it may be. So we're still a ways away from where we'd have to worry that they're truly hung. And so that's the problem is, though, they may be just as divided as we would expect based on public sentiment, and they may never be able to brook that disagreement. So what she's hoping for is to wait it out and see if they're able to resolve it one way or the other on their own. And that's a wise thing to do before you start to tell them, well, you can do this, you can do that, because then we are into hypotheticals, and that's not the court's role at this point.
So, Michael, just to clarify for our viewers, can the jury come in and go through the counts and say, on count 1, unanimously not guilty? I'm skipping here. Count 3, unanimously not guilty. Count 2, a hung jury. Can they, this was the big question the first time, can they deliver a verdict that way, and would then Karen Reed only still possibly be charged, once again, possibly, on that second charge?
That is correct. In fact, we saw it in the Harvey Weinstein trial recently in New York, where the jury was able to resolve some of the charges, but not all. And so, in requiring a unanimous verdict, the only verdicts that stand are those that are in fact unanimous from the jury. So what we could see happen is, let's assume, as you point out, and I pointed out that it's likely counts 1 and 3 that they're resolved, just like the last jury said they did. And then double jeopardy would bar the retrial on those counts, and there is a potential then on count 2, the vehicular manslaughter, the DUI manslaughter charge, and the DUI charges, that she would face a retrial potentially on those charges, or they may be able to try and resolve them in some way.
Can I ask, unless it's too complicated, give me the layman's term here. Why is 3 so, this is going to be the wrong word, easy to get to, but why, the first trial we know 1 and 3, we heard jurors say they were unanimous. Why is leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death seem to be easier to come to a unanimous agreement over versus, and I know there are more options on the second charge, but there's one that is motor vehicle homicide under the influence of liquor. Why is leaving the scene of
isn't that manslaughter?
in death?
I'm confused.
How do you come to that one more easily, potentially?
Well, the last jury really educated us on that. It's the knowingly leaving the scene of an accident having caused injury and death. or injury or death. And so the question becomes, knowingly, did she know she actually hit him and then left him there to die? That's what the last jury struggled with, and that's what this one is probably also having difficulty with. And if you do think about that, the evidence indicated that there were numerous phone calls post with the alleged time of the striking of the vehicle and John together that would seem to indicate, at least Miss Reed believes she was still talking to someone who was alive and was very angry with, but who could in fact interact with her. That would seem to indicate that she didn't knowingly hit him and leave him there to die. And that may be what the jury accepted, that they can't see proof beyond a reasonable doubt of her knowledge that she had struck him and left him there.
Michael, let's just go big picture for a moment, because I know the three of us have spent a lot of time discussing how differently these two trials were prosecuted and defended. But despite that, we are going through a deliberation process that looks so eerily familiar. How is it that the case could be presented so differently, but the jury seemingly ends up in the same place?
Well, and the fact is that both times we had two extraordinary sets of advocates on each side do a really good job with the case. And what it really tells you is that these facts are capable of being interpreted by different people in different ways. And this jury and all of us and the public are really split on what we think took place here. And unfortunately, the evidence isn't sufficiently conclusive that we may ever know what took place. But certainly not beyond a reasonable doubt, as this jury presently sees at least two of the counts. And that third count, it will be interesting to hear after the verdicts are ultimately achieved, what the struggle with and what the votes were with respect to whichever the remaining count of the indictments are that they're struggling with.
What would you expect the next step is? In other words, do you see them coming back with another, not question this time, but statement that says we have come to an agreement on two of the three charges? This is what they said if, in this question, they said if we came to. The next time, would you expect them to come with a verdict or potentially come with another statement that says if that we have come to an agreement on two of the charges, we are not in agreement on one of the charges?
Yeah, I think it's more likely the latter, where the jury will say, we do have a verdict with respect to two of the counts. We are at total opposites on the third count. We don't believe we'll be able to resolve that. What should we do? What can we report the verdicts that we have? I would expect something along those lines. Or, just as you point out, they could go back to the drawing board and see if they're in disagreement with. But my guess is that before sending this note in, they really have discussed it and believe that there's no changing some of the folks on that jury's minds with respect to the count that they still see as unresolved.
But here's where we go again, where we know more information. We heard Judge Kennedy speak to the lawyers in the courtroom to explain that she says it's hypothetical, theoretical, so I can't answer it. That is an answer for a later date. You go back and you're a jury and you see that. I don't know that they're going to say, okay, let's reword the question, and instead of saying, if we came to, let's now write a note that says, we have come to, and see what we get.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It must be tremendously frustrating as a juror to write a question and receive no answer.
In fact, it would be. You know, think of your days as a college student, and you ask a professor a question, and they come back with another question, and you know further along, and it is frustrating. And especially when they're resolving something that really deals with life and death and significant consequences for the defendant. So it's highly frustrating. And I imagine as lay people, trying to sort it out. What does she really mean? What can we do about it? It's not an easy one for them to come to a solution on. What I expect is that they may try to see if there's any way to resolve the disagreement, but it may well be that there's numbers on each side, so it's not like trying to convince a single person to change their position. You may be having to change multiple people's positions,
Exactly.
and that always is a lot harder.
There are day trying to get to a verdict in this retrial of Karen Reed. And it seems like at this hour they are in the same frustrating place as the jury before them tried to contemplate these same charges.
They are.
Whether or not Karen Reed is responsible for the death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe.
So then, what happens? How many times do you think Judge Canoni would ask them to go back if they get a note to follow up this one, which is again we're just laying the bricks of what the signals we're getting from the jury that they cannot come to an agreement on one of the charges. I assume she's not just going to accept that. She's going to ask them to go back in again. Last time she did that once. She did it a second time with that instruction. And then the third time when they came back Monday was when she finally declared a mistrial. Does that timeline seem similar?
That timeline seems right. You know, yesterday in talking about it, I didn't expect that she would call a hung jury before the beginning of next week. Now, as early as this, reporting that they believe they may be hung, that changes the timeline a little bit, but it won't be before tomorrow that she releases this jury and sort of throws her hands up and say, well, they just won't ever be able to resolve this disagreement among themselves. She's going to encourage them. She's going to give them the instruction. She's really going to try and have them recognize that they are the only folks that are going to be able to resolve this case at this point. The likelihood of another jury having any different result than we've seen now in the first two is slim and none.
All right, we'll see if this jury can return a verdict after all. Michael Coyne, our chief legal analyst, thank you very much. So 4 questions so far today. The day's not over yet, JC. Maybe there will be
No, it's not quite 2 o'clock.
But 4 questions so far. The first 3 questions were answered earlier today by Judge Beverly Canoni. But with this 4th question, she's not going to answer it directly. And
Why
for
not?
the defense, they seem pretty frustrated with that approach.
I think in general what we're hearing and what Michael Coyne is reinforcing is it sounds like we're in a similar situation. Do we know which charges they are speaking of? No. But they came to the judge to say if we have come to an agreement on 2 charges and if there is one charge we cannot be unanimous about, can we then separate that out and declare those verdicts? Or if you're hung up on one of the charges, then it's a hung jury for all 3. If that rings familiar to you, it's because that was what happened in the first trial. We just don't have the details this time. We are reading into the questions that they are posing. But right now, they didn't say we are at an impasse. They said if we're at an impasse. So there you go. We'll see what they come to. We still have a couple hours left in court today.
That's right. In fact, the jury will deliberate until at least 4:30, so perhaps they can make some more progress this afternoon inside that building, the Norfolk County Superior Courthouse. They listened
Okay, it ain't quite
31
done yet.
days, 8 weeks of court, and now they need to decide the fate of defendant Karen Reed. For J.C. Monahan, I'm Glenn Jones. We'll be back.
Okay, now we're done with that clip.
It's an exceptional shopping experience.
Bear with me, y'all. It's only 20 more minutes.
Even your childhood friend Kaylee was in the dark, so your families are like family.
Yeah, definitely.
You had no idea this was going on.
Not a clue. Right on my back.
School leaders offering supplies and a stage for something special.
I wanted everyone to cry.
So you got very clear to all of us.
Yes.
You wanted tears.
Yes.
You want unfolding.
Please reach underneath your seats. There's something plastic taped there.
It was a medley of emotions. And ultimately, a standing ovation. Graduation sure to stand the test of time for an artist who paints what she feels.
I knew it was a lot of work, but I did it.
Sam Brown, NBC News, Staten Island.
We thank Sam for that. That's the news for this Tuesday. Thank you so much for watching.
I'm Tom Yamas. Tonight, and always, we're here for you. Good night.
Make sure to record NBC Nightly News with Tom Yamas or add to your favorites now.
Jurors have questions for Judge Canoni as deliberations continue with the Karen Reed retrial.
So what are those questions, and what could this reveal about where the jury stands? We're breaking this all down tonight at 7 on Canton Confidential.
Today's kids are glued to their devices. They've traded FaceTime for FaceTime, and something's off. They're living in an online world. Parents can't see into it. Aura gives us visibility into that online world and works like an early warning system to tell us if something seems, well, off. Finally, the tool we need. Learn more at aura.com. You're watching NBC 10 Boston. News worthy of you. Tonight, another day of deliberations without a verdict.
It's been a long day for everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow on everybody's first day.
Yeah, I got a feeling they're gonna mistrial this case.
Four questions. What could they mean?
Folks will know all the evidence. Our fact finders.
We take a closer look at each question posed today with our legal experts. As verdict watch continues, the crowds are gathering outside the courthouse. What it's like outside. Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial, starts right now.
The third day of deliberations in the Karen Reed murder trial has come and gone with no verdict. Everyone of Jason Monahan.
And what Jones put, there was no shortage of activity inside and outside the courthouse as burning questions from the jury. Families, the trial watchers, everyone. Melanie Magnet's was among the people waiting outside. Well, what was the reaction from those crowds as the day unfolded?
Well, Glenn, it was actually fascinating to see as word spread about the jury questions coming into the judge, the energy out here cranked up a notch. Certainly the nerves went up a notch as well. So I went into the center of the masses to find out what people were saying. Take a look. 50 feet from the entrance to the courthouse, across the street and behind the metal gate, nerves are frayed. I'm anxious. I'm anxious as it's last year. My heart pounds when I think about it. Do you think you're going to get a verdict today? Everyone, it seems, is on edge. Emotions, what are you feeling? Sick, tired. Hopeful, I guess. A little hopeful. I think that hopeful will come off today. The crowd of Karen Reed supporters said there hours before we were celebrating the court just felt like today was the day. And I
Ooh,
don't
there we
I
go.
don't have a specific reason. I just felt like today was the day. And lots of
I'll be
attention
right
was
back.
coverage on their
I don't even
phones,
need to
laptops,
cut this
trying to
on.
extrapolate a bit of information they can. So news of the jury's questions to the judge today certainly gave them plenty to talk about. How having heard the jury questions, do you still feel confident you're going to have a verdict today? Part of me says yes, and part of me says no. I think they really hung up on the jury instructions, like they were last year. Very convincing. If they're not, the questions they're asking, they're not being, the answers not being met. The jury questions, do you know? Not losing hope, but patience, well, maybe a little bit. We'll figure it out.
Anxious. I want to be over so I get back to work. I know the life. I need a limited sleep.
A feeling echoed by William Reed on his way out of court, too.
Before I go.
For the jurors, we'll be back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Guys, we will be here before that, and we will stay until there's a verdict. Back to you. Thank you. Back with us tonight, both chief legal analyst Michael Coyne and former prosecutor Margaret McLean. We're going to take a closer look at the juror questions that were submitted today. So you see them on the screen there. It is, what is the time frame to the OUI charge? OUI at 12:45 a.m. or at 5 a.m.? Our video clips of jurors' interviews evidence how to consider them. Does the individual guilty on a subcharge? Number 5, the guilty overall charge. And the final question, if we find not guilty on 2 charges, but clear to guilty on 1 charge, is substitute jury on all 3 charges or just the 1? Starting with Sarah and David Zerulio on that one. You want to go to Judge Stone's responses. You're going to get your thoughts on each one. So let's start with that first one. What is the time?
All right, there we go.
5 or 5 a.m. she really driving at 12:45? Not according to the evidence. Right, and then came back with those retirement rounds as well, so, okay, that's question one.
Let's move on to question number two. Grant are the inference of Karen needs interviews evidence of the incident. Here's how the judge answered that one.
Videos are evidence. You should weigh the defendant's statements in the videos as you would any other piece of evidence.
That answer went on to include part of the humane practice instruction, telling the jury the defendant's statements must have been made voluntarily, freely, and rationally. From while using memory clips of evidence witnesses. Is there any doubt in your mind, Michael, that she was speaking voluntarily, freely, and rationally? The jury really is asking, based on how we see them, can we see them? And then now it makes some sense. Because to ask if a piece of evidence, which is already in evidence, can be used to convict, gets it sort of self-evident.
When she said, was it 4, was it 5, was it 6 strings, if that could be used as evidence, then she would probably. Yes, that's the way I was looking at it.
Okay. All right, let's go to question three. The jury asked, is convicting Diddy on a subcharge, for example, offense 2, number 5, could be the overall charge? So here's Judge Green's response.
If you find the defendant not guilty of the offense charged or any lesser included offense, stop inside the verdict slip.
All right, let's highlight just that portion of the verdict slip that we're talking about. Keeping in mind the jury used this as an example. We don't know for sure if this is the sticky point. It's charged to manslaughter while operating a vehicle under the influence of liquor. The subcharge, though, the number 5 they were talking about, is the drunk driving. The defense had asked for changes to the verdict slip to make this easier, as they thought, to understand, and just not change it. However, after the question came in today, she amended the verdict slip. We haven't seen what that means, but more importantly, she said, if it is point we find not guilty, it's her case. We find guilty, you stop and sign it. Was that enough to be for the jury?
At this point, I think so. I like the way she explained it. To me, she uses words, but it's like a ladder, right? You start at the top rung, which is manslaughter, and if you can't decide on that, you go to the next, which is a lesser included, which would be involuntary manslaughter. Then if you said, you're not guilty on that, you keep going. Well, then we have manslaughter, no, it's, what is it? Manslaughter. No, involuntary manslaughter, but then there's the other rung underneath that would be homicide, right? Felony manslaughter and homicide, OUI. And to me, and then you have OUI. So basically, you're going down the rung, and if you stop at number 2 and she's guilty, then that's it. You just sign off on your verdict. So I like the way she explained it.
Michael, you were great. That helped me a lot. Because of lesser charges, so it's individual convictions. So that you start with this one, and if you find it guilty, you don't have to
decided as being theoretical, they might put it into the context of what people think. This was the issue of the last trial. You can't call it theoretical. This was a real problem. So I guess my question for you is, what if this jury actually trying to avoid this problem? This is how this question is done. Yes, I think what they're trying to do is either in advance of a final resolution of
Dang it.
There's something to be said. Living in the moment.
Hold on.
There's something magical about making it last. Capturing those moments in time, making them something to be shared. The life, beauty lens, bring a story to life. And the next time you find yourself in the moment, capture it. Gear up with Adorama.
how are you pro-black woman that you don't believe in?
Crap. Hold on. That was not what I wanted. Here we go.
Either in advance of a final resolution on all
Here we
those
go.
counts,
We're back.
or saying, well, we've reached agreement on two of the counts, but we can't resolve our differences on the third. That's why, though, it's a hypothetical. They haven't reported to the court they have a verdict on any of the counts. At some point they will, or she will inquire this time whether they've reached a verdict on any of the counts. She wants to be careful not to force them to a verdict that would require them to abandon what they're in good faith they presently believe. Or do you agree on the decision not to directly answer the question because of those reasons?
Absolutely, because it's, it's a hypothetical, and, she doesn't, Judge Canoni has to be really careful that the juries, are they back there thinking, well, we know last year's trial was mistrial, it's very possible, and they were hung, so we don't want that to happen to us, how can we avoid that? And that's what Judge Canoni, wants to avoid.
And I think that's likely true if you think about it. If people before Karen Reed really understand the term hung jury or one count we can't resolve with the other two, it seems like this case has elevated everyone's awareness of those issues. All right, Michael Martin, thank you very much for helping us through what was a very, very dramatic and full day. Don't go anywhere. Our conversation continues after the break with Sue O'Connell. She shares her take on today's developments from inside the courtroom. This is Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial.
Toyota has 11 manufacturing plants across America. And now, during our All Across America event, college students and recent grads could get a $500 rebate over and above most other offers. Toyota, let's go places.
Of the 1 in 10 Massachusetts residents who have unclaimed money, 202,000 have uncashed paychecks. 117,665 are named Andrew. 52,500 have a pet bird. And one just got money back today. Find out if you have unclaimed funds at findmassmoney.gov. A division of the Massachusetts Treasury. Search your name at findmassmoney.gov.
You sure you're gonna be okay?
I'll be fine.
All right.
Hi. Hey. How are you guys?
We're getting by.
Great.
Never want to lose your edge. This is an SUV that really understands that. A Lexus RX.
Get special offers on select Lexus RX models. Everyone likes a party. Especially this one. Are you having?
Because all of these people receive life-changing treatments at South Coast Health. And, like Curtis, his medical team performed an angioplasty to open a full blockage of his heart's biggest artery. Today they have good reason to celebrate. Award-winning, nationally recognized heart and vascular care. Or South Coast Health.
So, what do you think about the cheap Wrangler? Very spacious, lots of open air. What are you going to use it for?
Thwarting international terrorism, saving the world. That kind of stuff.
Sorry, we just saw Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, and we are very excited to try. No mission is impossible with a Jeep Wrangler.
Well, all of our current FCA lessees can lease the 2025 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo X 4x4 for $329 a month. See your Boston area Jeep Grand dealer today.
This 4th of July, celebrate your freedom to rest on the best.
With 2 Consumer Reports recommended mattresses from Bob's Discount Furniture, the treasure with hundreds of 5-star reviews.
And the Copper Radiance with temperature
back down with Michael and our courtroom insider, Sue O'Connell, who I've been waiting to talk to because all the action was inside the court today. There was a lot that lawyers were called in and out multiple times. The jury came in and out multiple times, and I only can imagine, as we felt outside of court, that the tension is building with each one of these, wondering if this is going to be the moment that we get a verdict.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the tension is high, and also you're trying to read the emotions. That when the questions came back, the first three questions, the Karen Reed defense team was, again, ecstatic. They were happy at the sidebar. Dinetti and Karen, David Dinetti, the attorney, were looking at Karen's family and smiling and beaming, and tears started, and we have no idea what's going on. Like, it's certainly not a verdict, because we would know that. So what is the question that they feel so good about? And then we come back in at 1:30, different reaction to the fourth question, which was met with some anger and some concern. And meanwhile, the O'Keefe family, also just, this is just so hard for them to go through over and over again. And there's no real support in the courtroom because you're just in here for this kind of administrative stuff that is going to have such a big impact.
She does have a large team, so her presence there, as you've mentioned, in a small courtroom, makes a noise.
Four questions, Sue, which is a departure from the first jury, which really only passed one note during the whole proceeding. When you look at these four questions, does it tell you anything between the lines that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, my prediction, and it might be a projection, emotional projection, so it might be a confirmational bias here, is that I feel like they probably know there was a mistrial last time, and they probably know it was messy, and I think that they are very concerned about getting this right. So whatever they're going to decide on whatever charges, they want to make sure they understand the implication, not the implication to Karen or the implication to the justice system, but that they're doing it the way that they intend to do it and doing it correctly. So I think some of these might be preemptive questions that they wanted to get out. I think there was a variety, even though they were sort of in the same lane. Well, what if we do this, or what if we do that? What happens here? So I think that they're just being very conscientious. And again, this jury, I felt like I was in a PhD program every single day watching them. I'm not surprised they're asking such smart questions.
That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, would you just explain?
No, it wouldn't. And that's the question is, what was their intent? Have they gotten far enough that it really start to make the hard decisions with respect to which one do we think she's not guilty on? We have some real debate as to whether there's no reasonable doubt on any of the charges.
So when you see the team on Karen Reed's side huddle together as they do, and today they weren't necessarily sidebar, there was a lot of chit-chat right at the table. You're right there, a positive attitude at one point.
Yeah, I mean, they're very emotive. The defense team is very emotive, and Karen is very emotive, and they, it's the understatement of the year, and her family reacts. So we may not know, hear what they're doing. I mean, I could tell during the setup for the closing arguments, they also were ecstatic about, I think, the judge allowing them to use some of those visuals. I could see those on the tech guy's computer screen, so I can't hear them, but you can kind of see which direction things are going by the reactions, and they're just expressive.
There's no denying we are closing in on the end of this trial, so let's look ahead to some of the penalties that Karen Reed could face if she's found guilty on any of the charges. If she's convicted of second-degree murder, there's a possible punishment of life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after a minimum of 15 years. In regards to manslaughter while operating under the influence of liquor, the defendant could face a minimum mandatory prison sentence of 5 years and a maximum of 20. That's in addition to a fine of up to $25,000. There's also a license suspension of at least 15 years and potentially for life.
If Reed is found guilty of leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death, there's a mandatory minimum sentence of 1 year in jail or 2.5 years in state prison, fines between $1,000 and $5,000, a mandatory license suspension of at least 3 years. But as for that lesser charge of OUI, the punishment can be up to 2.5 years in prison, which, Michael, I was talking to you. Rare, if ever, happens to a first-time offender, but it is up to the judge up to 2.5 years. Is that correct?
That's correct. The legislature has given the judge the discretion to sentence a defendant, even on a first-time offense, for up to 2.5 years. That would be highly unusual for a first-time offender. This is, in fact, a highly unusual
unusual driving under the influence case.
Can I put you guys on the spot and just say what do you think is going to happen?
For the decision or sentencing, if she's guilty,
Let's go with if she were to be guilty of OUI, what would Judge Cannoni be giving?
I think she'll sentence her to mandatory alcohol ed program, some supervised probation. I don't see a jail sentence coming from just the DUI. It's a question of if you look at count two, there's a lot more serious offenses there which she will do prison time, and that's going to be a pretty new state.
So can I just ask you, if we do end up with the result that JC was just mentioning, hypothetically, convicted only on OUI, what are we going to follow up? Yes, I mean, it would be, first of all, it'd be devastating for, Keith's family. They go through all of this for 2 years, and it turns out there's just an OUI charge. I mean, it's not just, it's obviously a serious thing, but, I mean, in the comparison of murder charges and manslaughter charges. And it will say, for the second time, the Commonwealth was unable to get a conviction on a murder and a manslaughter. So obviously, there's a third charge. Huge reaction from the public if it turns out she's not guilty on all counts or guilty on the OUI.
Are we back here tomorrow with a verdict?
I think so.
I think not.
I think so.
I want to say mistrial.
So much. We're going to find out.
I got a feeling the verdict is going to be mistrial.
She knows how I say that. No, I would think by the end of tomorrow, the thoughtfulness that you have said with this jury and the questions that they sent, but who knows? Michael, how many times have you told us? You never know.
Michael, and so thank you. Remember to join us every night at 7 on NBC 10 Boston. We'll have a full recap of the latest developments from court as well as we.
I want to say thank y'all for joining me. Please like, share, subscribe. I'm not sure the next time I'm going to come back with you guys. For those that came in and watched, I thank you. Once more, please like, share, subscribe. Enjoy your evening. Good night.